Hey everybody, it's Mark Pattison, former NFL player, now climbing the 7 summits, and welcome to another fantastic episode of Finding Your Summit, all about people overcoming adversity and finding their way. Okay, look, 7-8 years ago, I had to step into the fear and put a big ass goal out there, and so I decided to start climbing all these crazy mountains around the world. It's been an absolute amazing journey. And, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I've actually done 6 of the 7. I've actually been on Denali twice. I've been on climbed successfully Kilimanjaro twice. But now it's Mount Everest, the biggest boy on the block, 29,000 plus. And I'm headed over there April 2020, and I'm totally keyed up. And I'm keyed up because I've been doing all this preparation. I train like an absolute bear. And really putting myself in a position of success. I'm going to be climbing with one of the top climbing outfitters in the world. Excited about that. And just the mountain has fascinated me for years, I'm sure like others, but really excited to do so. And so if I can actually pull this thing off, I'd be the first NFL player to do so. And so as we speak today, there's not that many first in the world. So I look forward to tackling that. Okay, so that's one. 2 is I totally appreciate the listen on these different podcasts. I really do. And it's been an amazing journey, as I said, from not just interviewing these people, but being on the other side of the mic and really taking in their incredible stories of doing amazing things. And look, we all need to be inspired. And so if I can help provide and find more people that meet that criteria, all the better. And we all need that motivation, and we all need those words of encouragement that you can make it back relevant to your own situation, and then plow forward in whatever endeavor you are trying to do. Okay, so I appreciate that. And if you want to find out anything that I have going on, you can do so at markpattisonnfl.com. I've got a book out now called Finding Your Summit, go figure. And it is essentially the playbook to what I had learned from my Hall of Fame coaches on how to emerge and do some great things in your life. It doesn't have to be mountain climbing, of course. It can be anything, but it's a plug-in that you take on these different things, these different goals, these different strategies that I've set forth, that they set forth for me. And good things can come from that. Okay. Also on the website, you can find out more about my expedition. Obviously, I'll be going to Mount Everest, and we'll have more information about that coming up. There's an e-learning course, and of course the podcast. And when you go to the podcast, you will find an iTunes tab. And I would be so grateful if you go in and you'd rate and review. Now, it all has to do with visibility, popularity of podcasts, because there's so many podcasts out there today that it's so easy to get lost and like, where's Finding Your Summit? And I really do believe these stories are really amazing and incredible, and can really give a lift to those people who really need it. And even if you don't, we all need to be motivated and inspired by other people to keep going. So if you'd go in and do that, I would be really, really appreciative. Okay? So let's go listen to the pod. It's going to be awesome. Here we go. Hey everybody, it's Mark. I'm back with another fantastic episode of Finding Your Summit, all about people overcoming adversity and finding your way. And the reason why I'm kind of giggling about this is because I've been through my share, and certainly the guy I have on today, not only did I follow his career, but he certainly has gone through his war, his battles, and now he's back stronger than ever and doing some really positive things in the world. I'm really fortunate to have on this week's guest, Floyd Landis. Floyd, how you doing?
I'm well, thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, listen, I'm pumped up because back in the day, and we're going to kind of reset to when you grew up. I've got some questions about that, but let's just go straight to it. You were the winner of the 2006 Tour de France, and that is the most grueling race. I think I've done some things in my life that's really pushed me. I'm going to Everest next April, and that certainly is going to be another element. But to essentially have whatever it is, 21, 22, 23 days in the month of July, racing all through France. I've been to many of those places that you've gone up, and we didn't know each other at the time, but I remember when I was there years ago, and I would think about the Pyrenees and all these other places that I had been, and gosh, I wonder what it's going to be like that. I've also had friends that there's some deal in there where you can ride behind the race or in front of the race before it comes. And it's, I don't know, they break it up in segments, but to not only compete in that, but actually to win it is just a phenomenal thing. And it also happened in a time when Lance, the whole phenomena around that was really blowing up. And so a lot of eyeballs were tuned in towards the Americans who were doing so well. So congratulations on that. Amazing.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, obviously everybody that knows sports probably heard the rest of the story about the whole thing. But yeah, I was proud of it. And yeah, it feels like a long time ago, but it certainly altered the rest of my life as well.
Well, we'll get into that in a minute, and we'll go through that, and I'll give you my 2 cents on kind of how I see the world on that. But so I happen to be I'm here in Sun Valley. I know you live in Leadville, which is like 10,000 plus, the highest city in the U.S. And by the way, I do want to talk about the Leadville race because I've been trying to get into that thing for years, and it's a lottery, so maybe you have some pull that I don't. But I was
trying to talk you out of it, actually.
Yeah. A lot of pain, 100 miles, 50 one way or 50 right back the other. But I was riding with some guys here in Sun Valley last week and very excited about having you on the pod. And one of the guys was from the East Coast. And so he was telling me the story that when he was a younger kid, he had shown up for this race, some kind of mountain biking race. And here's this guy named Floyd Landis, and you show up and you've got these goofy looking pants on or something. And they're like, who's that clown over there? And you end up like smoking the field. And they didn't know. And I said, well, why would he show up? I mean, this is a guy that obviously is very talented, but you grew up, I guess, as a Mennonite. And I said, well, what the hell is a Mennonite? I don't even know. And he said, well, kind of like Amish. And I still don't know what that exactly means. So can you kind of explain the way that you grew up in that environment, and then how you got turned on to being on a bike?
Yeah, for sure. So I grew up in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and it's probably, like you said, more well known for the Amish community there. But those two communities came from sort of the same beginning, at least. They're from what was called the Anabaptist movement. So they in Europe at the time, 1700s, they objected to having their children baptized at birth, right? That their philosophy was that it should be the person's choice, and they should wait until the person is aware that and making a decision to be baptized, and they were persecuted for it. And so they kind of left and went different places. Some of them dealt with it in different ways. Some went to Russia. There's a few communities there, but the most well-known community ended up in Lancaster County. And then the Amish and Mennonites sort of split from their own original church and created their own sort of set of rules. And they're not that different, but the main thing that they're known for is sort of just being their own little community and not necessarily participating in politics or other, not to a certain extent, the broader economy. I mean, they prefer to live a simple life. They don't try to take over the world in that sense, right? They like having community where people take care of each other. And honestly, as far as religions goes, it's a good way to grow up. I mean, I had good parents and it just lived a simple life. I didn't have, a lot of exposure to the rest of the culture in the United States. I didn't have a television. I didn't have really a radio other than, listening to gospel music and things like that. So it was relatively isolated way to grow up, but it certainly wasn't bad. I mean, I had great parents.
Yeah. And so where did the affinity for the bike come in play?
Well, when you're a kid and you only have, you're only exposed to so much, but you find something that you enjoy doing. And I happened to be talented at it. Right. And I happened to just pick it up at about the time mountain biking sort of became a thing. Really, it was probably the early 90s when mountain biking actually became a term, and people would ride their bikes on dirt roads and things like that before, but there weren't specific mountain bikes and races and things like that. And so, I became friends with the guy at the local bike shop who had promoted some of the local races around there, and just happened to start doing it because I liked riding my bike. For me, it was kind of therapy, just ride and think about life. And I mean, to some extent, that's what a lot of endurance sports are, right? It's the way to just get into sort of a state of mind where you can just think about life and think about things and let your mind wander. And for me, it was kind of therapy as a kid, and it just turned into racing.
Yeah, so I read, I'm not sure if this is true or not, but your father, for you just mentioned great parents and everything, but sometimes they're supportive and sometimes they're not. And it sounded like he wasn't all that supportive about you, this racing thing. What is that all about? And as you just mentioned, that the whole mountain biking thing and the race thing really hadn't become where, what is the future? Where can you go with this? Where it is today? And he wasn't all that supportive. And you were out there sneaking out at night, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, and off you'd go. I can't even imagine, pitch black in the forest or something, on these dirt roads, off you went.
Yeah, I have to sort of put it in the right context, because it wasn't that he wasn't supportive of what I wanted to do. He just didn't see that as and again, that goes back to their whole community and their way of life, right? He didn't see that as something he could reconcile with, their view of what work really means, to do something meaningful. And
Yeah.
they didn't see professional sports as something that really worth spending your life on. And I understand it from his point of view. And if you really think about it, I guess they are kind of pointless, but they didn't have any exposure to professional sports, and neither did I, but I was a kid. And so I found friends that were into cycling as well. And I kind of just, it became an obsession or passion at least. And he didn't really see it that way. So he would always go out of his way to give me enough to do so that I didn't have that much time to ride my bike during the day. But, I don't, and even then I didn't have any animosity toward him. I saw it differently than him. And, I think life's long, right? And I think that both my parents have kind of watched everything happen, and they've sort of changed as well and learned a lot about the world and the way it works. But back then, yeah, he just saw it as sort of, okay, great. If you want to ride your bike from time to time or use it to get around, that's one thing. But if that's all you think about and that's all you do, then that's probably not a healthy way to live.
Yeah, it was interesting because when you were just mentioning that, it brought back some memories. I grew up in Seattle, and there was a buddy of mine that lived down on the water, and by Lake Washington, and big shipping magnet builder. He had a whole operation in Chile and San Diego and those other places. And the long and short of it was that I'd be out there in his backyard playing with his son all the time, shooting baskets. And he'd always say to his son, really to me, is like, what's the point? Versus just he wants to work and work hard. And he didn't see the path at all, similar type deal. And it's just like, to me, that was just noise, because that was what I was passionate about. He wasn't an athlete. He was a shipbuilder and, made tons of money. But, you never know where these things can go in life. And certainly for me, it ended up in the NFL and now climbing mountains. And for you, you had this, you've had this amazing, cycling career. And so going back though, for just a minute, do you still practice at all any part of the Mennonite, ways? I'm sure that's like that's built into kind of who you are a little bit in terms of your values and everything, but just in terms of the way they live their life, is that something you still do, or have you kind of moved on? And
No, I wouldn't classify myself as religious at all at this point. But it took a long time. When you grow up being told something and have a reason to resent the people and go the other direction, sometimes it's difficult to convince yourself one way or the other whether their beliefs are the right ones. And I tried to say this earlier by saying they're great parents, and it's not a bad religion, or at least doesn't have a lot of negative outcomes. I mean, their beliefs and their belief system and the way they treat community is great, and I think there's a lot to be said for that. But I don't practice, and I don't go to church. I'm not part of that community anymore.
yeah, well, I can appreciate that. I mean, my mother is, you got God, you've got the Pope, you got Mother Teresa, and my
Exactly.
mother, right?
Yeah,
So
I feel the same way about my mom. So
that
yeah.
is the flipping pecking order right there. All right, so you go off, and now you're riding these races. You've got these goofy pants on, but now that as you probably work your way up the food chain, you're putting on the spandex and you're wearing the right stuff, and now you transition from mountain biking and those types of racing to really understanding like your path, where you want to go, has to be on the road. And the road then leads you to races that, I mean, you look back at your resume and, geez, you've got some really impressive, notches on your belt in terms of races you won, that you competed in. You took, I mean, as I was reading about you, a lot of times I know there's guys that they specialize on hills, or they're sprint guys or whatever. it sounded that you were just the kind of all around, you kind of had a lot of these different buckets. Was that just a natural thing that you came up with, or was that something that you really honed and worked on?
No, I think that most of that is anchored in genetics, right? I don't think that I mean, look, you can train for years and years, but you have to have some underlying, excuse me, innate talent that you don't really have any control over, and you have to be born with, right? That there's a few people in the world that, given the right circumstances and training in any given year, could win the Tour de France, and then there's billions of people that just simply don't have that, for lack of a better word, talent. I mean, it's kind of a maybe not the right word, but there has to be some underlying ability there that you can actually exploit by training, rather than a lot of people probably attribute more of it to hard work than they should. Not that it doesn't take a lot of hard work, but when you're that good at something as a kid, and you're people talk about suffering in cycling, but it's not really pain like that, and it's enjoyable when you're making progress and you're winning races from time to time. And so, yeah, the underlying talent is you can't go without that. And then of course it takes work on top of that. But for me, I enjoyed it. I mean, it was I enjoyed the journey of it.
Yeah, no, look, you're saying these things, and we speak the same language. I always say this nowadays, especially on the mountains, because I'm obviously not playing football anymore. But it's just pain is temporary, and you have to invite and you have to embrace it. But yet also to get there and to develop that really tough mindset, you also have to push your body to limits you don't even know that you have, and then that creates toughness, that creates grit, that creates the stuff that you need to have to push through when things get really tight, because it happens. Not every day you show up and you're at your best. For you, where do you think you developed the mindset? And before you answer, I want to answer my own question. And part of that was really through when I played football back in the days. I'm talking about college now at the highest level in the NFL, where it is just dog eat dog and a brutal world and tough and everything else, and people are fighting. And there's certain strategies that I've talked about before in this pod. A lot of it's the pyramid of success from John Wooden, just all these different tiers. But the bottom line is that you have to be accountable for yourself and push yourself. And if you're not self-motivated, then you're going to have a long road getting there, because your talent can only take you so far. So for you, where did you develop that mindset?
I don't know. I think I was kind of always, even as a kid, I guess competitive is the right word. Some people seem kind of indifferent, even as kids, about whether they win at a game or sports or anything else. I think I was born with that kind of competitive mindset. But along the way, I felt like I kept making progress, and I kept thinking to myself, look, if I can just keep making small steps like this, I don't see any reason why I can't make it to the top, and why anybody else should deserve it any more than me. And I guess it's never about who deserves it the most. But for me, it was always in the back of my mind that there's no reason that if I keep working hard and progressing like this, that I can't be the very best at it. And that was always sort of the driving force in my mind, even when I was in the very beginning, when I first started racing. But it's funny you say that about the NFL and the whole dog eat dog thing, because I think about that sometimes and I know you wanted to go into the subject a little bit at some point anyway, but about the doping side of things in sports.
Yeah.
It's and I hesitate to use the word that it's like a war, because that's downplaying what an actual war is, where people are dying. But I watch football, and football is a great example of an even more just dramatic example of the point is that, I mean, by absolutely every definition, those guys on the field are nearly trying to kill each other. I mean, there isn't really, I would not want to be out there. And I think it's like that in every sport at the top level. They may not be physically hitting each other, but you're going to put yourself through as much pain as you can to try to, make the other guy give up or beat whatever his weaknesses are. And so that to me, that's where kind of the hard part to explain about the doping part of cycling, at least when I was there, was, look, this is a war. These guys, this race goes on. If you crash and hit a tree and you die, that the race doesn't stop. These guys don't care about you. And if you care about them, you're going to get beat. And so it's probably not a healthy it's not a healthy mindset, but in the context of sports, when everybody's playing by those rules, you can sort of just justify it in your head. And that's kind of the underlying way that we justified it.
Yeah, look, I'm as I said before we went live here. I'm a fan, and I'm a fan of yours. I'm a fan of Lance's. I'm a fan of anybody who went through that. And simply for this reason is that it's the equal playing field. If everybody's doing it, whether it's right or wrong, that's what they're doing. And, from a person who played in the NFL, and I was, as I mentioned before, I was there when I saw Lyle Zato, and he was, injecting, all the time. And in our sport in those days, it wasn't illegal. And so it was just really a thing of, do you want to be faster and stronger? And that can mean hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions in your pocket and longevity of career. And I never ended up crossing that line, but I can tell you I was offered. I can tell you that I was tempted. And when you live and breathe, and you're obsessed with making it at the top rung, people on the outside are easy to judge, and they don't really understand what it's like to be immersed in that culture. All my friends were the other football players. We're all thinking about the same thing. All your friends, 24/7. You're living in an apartment with Lance and the rest of the U.S. Postal Team, day in, day out, day in, day out. You guys train together. You eat together. You talk together. You're going through all this stuff. You're not out there talking with Joe Blow on the street, for the most part, about, hey, what's your life up to? Because you guys are immersed in this world. So I totally get it. And for that reason, that the jersey that you won because it was the equal playing field.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think it's an interesting sort of thought experiment to think about the philosophical question about it when you put it in the context where you were, where it wasn't actually even, it wasn't against the rules. There were no explicit rules, right?
No.
So there may have been people with different beliefs about whether or not it was okay, but was there anyone there that held it against guys that did it as cheating, or how was it viewed? Because in the context where I experienced it, we all knew that it was clearly against the rules, but we all sort of had this social agreement on the inside of the whole sport that we understood that we weren't following those rules, that those were more of a sort of a PR thing. I think that's changed now. I mean, I hope it has, but otherwise it seems kind of pointless. But back then, how was it viewed with the other football players?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and I think the answer was it wasn't viewed as cheating because it wasn't against the rules, right? And so if somebody was doing that, it was just like, oh, they're on the juice or they're not, and it really didn't go beyond that. Other than, can you play football and can you help my team win?
Yeah.
And that's the only, especially with Al Davis, of the Raiders, it's just just win, baby. So whatever you got to do.
Made for some good TV viewing, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, look, it also really accelerated any anger that you had in there. These guys rip off their helmets and start swinging.
Oh man.
Yeah, you just had to take cover when you could. But anyway, so how did it play out in you were part of the U.S. Postal Team, which was just like, you guys were rock stars back in the day. But from 2000 and 2004, you were on the U.S. Postal Team. How did you get recruited to be on that team from Lance Armstrong?
Yeah, so I cycling doesn't have a kind of like well, it does now, but it's minimal compared to the big ball sports in the United States. But doesn't really have like a farm system or a collegiate system that you sort of work your way through, or that people typically work their way through to get to the professional side of it. It's more it's a self-funded thing, and generally speaking, most people that get into it, they're either somebody around them or somebody influencing them as a kid got them into it, right? Whether it's their parents or some other mentor around that saw that they had some talent for cycling. But for me, I did well in the mountain bike side of things, where it didn't require a team, so it was not prohibitively expensive to go and race your bike. And I got to a certain point where I realized that my skills were better suited for road racing, and so I started doing some of that, and I got picked up by a small American team. Well, at the time, it was the biggest American team, continental team. Was sponsored by Mercury, the car company, and I was on that team for 2.5 years. We won a lot of the U.S. races, and I did well in a couple of the smaller European races that we went and we would do from time to time. And of course, Lance at that time had already won up by 2001. I joined Postal Service in 2001, already won 3 tours, right? So then they were always looking for, younger guys that they could bring on the team, and especially Americans. I mean, I was lucky that I was an American and getting decent results, because it was always good for the Postal Service to have as many Americans as they could. It's not as much as it was seen as an American team. It was, by and large, just the best guys they could find, right? So there was, from at any given time, 5 or 8 Americans on the team out of probably 30 guys. So I was lucky in that sense. I was at the right time and place. And I got a call from Dan Ospo, was a guy that was running the U.S. side of the Postal Service team at that time, back in 2000, and asked if I wanted to join the team. And of course, I mean, I had watched Lance win those first 3 tours, and to me, it was a dream to be able to be on that team and be part of that program that was run. I mean, and again, that's another thing about sports, that people talk about it, but you don't see how much of a difference it makes when a team is run well and the atmosphere is good and everybody believes you can win. So for me, it was a huge step forward to be asked to be on that team.
Incredible. And you were also, I'm going to say this wrong, I'm going to heck this word up, the Dominique. Is that how you say that?
Domestique, we call it.
Domestique.
That's generally anybody that's not a leader or has some other specific goal to try to win a stage or something like that on a team is referred to as a domestique, and you're the guys that, ride in front of your leader or in front of the race to try to just. The biggest part about cycling and this tactics is drafting, right? So if your leader is riding behind you, he's not doing as much work as you are, and so you try to deliver them to the hardest parts of the race, whether it's a mountain or a sprint finish, having spent as little energy as possible, and then they go for the win. And it's kind of weird in that way too, because an individual wins, but it's a team support. So that part's a hard sell to a lot of the American audience that aren't actually cyclists, but it's just the dynamics of it.
Hey, this pod is sponsored by Laird Superfood. So many products to choose from your InstaFuel, your coffee, your tea, your smoothies. And I love the superfood creamer and use the hydration powders like the beets, the coconut, the matcha, the turmeric to mix all into my 7 Summit smoothie. And it's so good. Log on to lairdsuperfood.com and get your 20% off when you use the code MARKP20. Okay? So get your Laird Superfood, and I guarantee it will help fuel your journey. So when you came on, did Lance or anybody else on the team say, look, we want you on the team, but here are kind of the conditions, we're going to give you this, but we want that. And so kind of laid it out on, this is the way that we found success, and it's, top secret, but we need you to do this. Are you on board with that?
Yeah. It was out in the open once you were on the team. And when you're even on a smaller team, when you're in the sport, it was, performance enhancing drugs were generally talked about. Mm-hmm. And it was more or less an open secret within the peloton or within the professional group of riders. But that team did a better job than some of actually managing it from the top. Some teams would just kind of look the other way and let the riders do whatever they want, which came with more risk, right? Because the riders generally don't have the expertise to get everything right. And so the Postal Service team did a better job of, hiring the best doctors and actually managing it well. And in that way, it's safer for the riders as well, because not just as a matter of risk of getting caught, but just once you go down that path, it's easy to get into a mindset of, well, more of this is probably better. And it's not necessarily true. I mean, and I don't mean to downplay whether we were breaking the rules or not, but you don't have to use very much of these hormones in cycling, because you're not trying to build muscle. You're not trying to be bigger. You actually want to be smaller. So using these products for recovery, you use very small amounts of them. And if it's managed well, I think there's a lot more health risk to taking products like that and trying to be bigger and have more muscle. I think there's more, longer term risk. Whereas in cycling, if you had decent doctors and oversight and guys that actually cared about the rider's long-term health, you didn't have to do that much more. So, this is going to sound like a weird thing to say, but I was lucky that we had that guidance and people trying to explain that, look, don't just overdo this. This is not the answer. This is not the end all be all. It's just the one little block in the, the wall we're trying to build here.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. In football, of course, the guys were bulking up, right? Just getting, and it was noticeable. So when you're walking around, if you have a shot of EPO or something, I'm just asking, this is my own curiosity. Do you feel just rejuvenated, or do you feel like, you can fly high, or you feel normal, but your body just performs like it always does because you've been conditioning it?
Yeah, I think there might be some small placebo effect, but really, and I never used any of those drugs, whether it was anabolics or EPO, outside of when I was in the best shape of my life. So I didn't really feel any different. You had better numbers, like you went faster. That was
Yeah.
measurable relatively quickly as well. But there wasn't you didn't use enough of any of these things to give you some of the side effects where you feel more aggressive or feel some euphoria or anything like that. They generally just, I mean, they worked. And so you had this placebo effect where you felt better about yourself because you went faster, but you didn't really feel any different in the moment.
Yep. So now you've got great race results. You're winning, and you're standing out amongst the other riders of the peloton. And now you go off and you do your own thing, and ultimately it ends up where you're leading your own group, and you win in 2006. And then 4 days later, everything blows up. Literally, man.
Oh,
What?
man.
I can't even imagine. I mean, because you're on a worldwide stage, I mean, I can only ask the question, what did that feel like? I mean, it must have been awful.
Yeah, it was probably the worst thing I've ever felt. It took me years to recover from it. I was conflicted. So I wasn't as good at being defiant as Lance was. He had, I mean, look, he had years of being famous before he ever had to address this. I was on this team, and so I had some attention from the press, but really they didn't care about me. It's just they wanted to talk to the rest of Lance's team because he just rarely talked to the press. So the only time we interacted was with the press. We were generally talking about our team leader, which was Lance, and so that was the first time I experienced any kind of fame on that level at all, and it was immediately negative. And I was completely unprepared, to deal with it on every level. I didn't have a team of PR people. I didn't have anything, and I felt like I only had one choice, but to deny it. I mean, at that point, if I had admitted it, my career was over, and nobody wants to see their career end in the middle of it like that.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it was more or less over anyway, but I was not in a position to be able to accept that. And also, I mean, the other problem is it's hard to try to even envision, but I was exhausted at this point, right? That race is three weeks long. And when it's over, it takes months till you really feel better and can think clearly anyway. And I had to try to manage all that. And yeah, it was a complete disaster. I mean, I guess, and it doesn't matter now. I feel much better just having been able to tell the truth. But if I really wanted to get away with it or fight it, there would have been much better ways to do it than what I did, put it that way. But yeah, it was some dark days there.
Yeah, I mean, we all go through things, and it's easy to sit here today in 2019 and reflect back on what happened in 2006. And at the time, you were right, because as I was thinking back, in those days about, taking steroids and not, I'm asking myself, is this the right thing to do? I'm not 20 years down the road looking back on, the health effects and everything else that would have taken. And so I can totally understand where you're going. I've been doing this since high school. And then I turned pro. Then I've had this worldwide success on a team with Lance. Now I've gone off and done my own thing, and now I'm gonna get. If I admit to all this stuff, I'm gonna go right off the cliff. And right now, I'm gonna do what everybody else is doing, which is denying it, which is understandable. And just it's just. I think because of Lance, I think if the whole Lance thing hadn't happened, then maybe there wouldn't have been so much pressure on you. But because he was so defiant and he kept, denying it and taking people down and everything else, it just kept, ballooning so much bigger. And anybody around and within that orbit that was close to it, was going to get a lot of attention, positively or negatively. And, that I'm sure affected you too.
Yeah, I mean, it obviously it affected the way the press saw it because they had kind of felt like Lance took it a little too far. And I think most of the cycling press, at least, I don't know about the mainstream press in the U.S. or how much attention they really even paid to it, other than that it was Lance and the cancer story was good and it helped a lot of people, and so that was a positive thing, right? But the journalists inside of cycling, I mean, I think they would be lying if they said they didn't, as much as you can know anything, know that there was doping going on, and that to some extent everybody that was winning big races was in on it. And I guess as much as I agree with you, I also don't want it to sound like I was blaming Lance. I mean, that was his personality. That's why he won the race 7 times. I mean, he was a fighter, right? And so he may have indirectly created a scenario where it was a little bit worse for me, but that doesn't really change whether those decisions were right or wrong or anything else about it. And it wasn't really by design. It just kind of happened that way. I think that was just the nature of things.
Yeah. Do you? I'll ask you the one Lance question. Do you think? And I'm not talking about whether he should have done steroids or not, or EPO, because that's what everybody else was doing. I'm not talking about that, but just in terms of how many people that he took down and was pretty brutal too. Do you think he's remorseful about any of those things, or what's your view on that?
Initially, I didn't think he was, and I didn't think he was even capable of it. But I saw him do an interview a couple months ago on NBC, maybe NBC Sports. I can't remember exactly where it was, but he looked different. He looked like, and he said he's been, going to therapy, and I don't know if that's a PR thing or not, and I don't really care. But to me, he did seem more genuine, and he seemed like he wasn't so. Look, he can be very, very charismatic when he's on point, and when he's being filmed, and when he's being Lance Armstrong, the famous guy. He's very, very good, but he looked more natural. He looked a little nervous, actually, which is why I think he looked more natural. But to me, he looked like he meant it. I mean, I hope he did. Yeah. I mean, I don't know how he feels about me. I haven't talked to him in years. I assume he's probably still got some animosity there, and that's probably justified. But I think he sees the bigger picture now, and it takes a long time. That's because I lived through it. I have a better sense for how long it takes to kind of actually remove yourself from cycling far enough to realize how the rest of the world sees it, or how important it is or isn't, and actually have a perspective on it, because that was his whole life, right? And he had to fight too and try to keep it. And I think it takes a long time, but to me, he seems like he has a better context now, and understands that. I think understands why people were so upset with him. I don't know that initially he understood that it wasn't so much about the doping in the first place. It was more kind of how he dealt with people that were his adversaries. And like I said, it made him a great athlete and a great fighter, but he didn't know when to turn it off. But I think he's got a better perspective on it now.
Appreciate that. So I want to move on. So the name of this podcast is Finding Your Summit, all about people overcoming adversity, which we've just talked about. And I could go on my 2-hour, rant on my own podcast if I wanted to about my adversity. But then the other side of it is then finding your way, right? And so, it's like I say this, life after football. That's my little saying. I mean, literally for me, life after football. But for a lot of people, for you, life after cycling. And so, all this craziness goes on in your life. And how I got connected into you is through, I don't even know. I might have seen your article on Outside Magazine, and I was fascinated, not so much about your past, which I followed, but also about this new business that you started. I think it was back in 2016. And it's called Floyd's on the Go, and it's CBD. And I want to talk about that. And I want to, before you do, my daughter has been afflicted with epilepsy since she was 6 years old. She's now 20. She's never been able to drive, no monkey bars, no riding a bike. She probably has, I don't know, anywhere from 10 to 20 seizures per day. They're short term. And so we've been on this path, and she's doing so much better. It got really critical this last semester, last May, at the University of Arizona, and but she's back. She's stronger. We've adjusted her diet. We've done a lot of things, but we're also experimenting around with CBD. We've heard there's been a lot of great results. So I just want to inject my own. Like I've lived as a parent, but I haven't lived her pain and what she's had to go through, and her not being able to do a lot of things that most normal 20-year-old kids can do. And that's been her path. I don't know why she was chosen as this, but when I saw your product, Floyd's on the Go, I wanted to reach out, and I'm obviously got a huge interest in your cycling background, but really as we go forward and overcome your adversity and finding your way, you've really hooked into something, and something that is like, you talked about you're back in the day being in the right place at the right time. I think this is another example for you being in the right place at the right time. So with all that, tell me how you got into CBD, how you decided to start this new company. It sounds like it's going really well.
Yeah, it's great. And I guess first of all, I should say I have a little 5-year-old daughter, and I can only imagine what kind of just anxiety that was like, having to live with her and loving somebody that much and seeing them go
Yeah.
through that kind of pain. So yeah, I hope that, in the long term they do find a real solution for it. And there is, I don't know if you're using, or if she's using the current actual FDA approved CBD products, but there are some, and it seems to really benefit people with epilepsy, depending on the severity of it. But
Mhm.
anyway, I feel for you, put it
Thank
that
you.
way, and
Yeah.
her as well. But I initially got into the marijuana side of the business, and in the marijuana business, the CBD was not, I shouldn't say well understood or studied, because that's kind of came from the black market, but people understood it as a medicinal compound, and probably a lot of the reason for why marijuana was called, a medicinal product in the first place. A lot of people saw it as, and to some extent it was kind of an end run around the law, right? Let's make it medicinal and make it in California, legalized it, and they have prescriptions, but it was kind of just game to the point where the prescriptions were meaningless. And so I was in the marijuana side of things. I got into that because I had been prescribed a bunch of opiates. I had my hip replaced in 2006 after that Tour de France, and it takes a long time for those things to kind of, your body to kind of adapt to a new joint of that size. And so I had a lot of pain, and I also was going through that other life crisis, for lack of a better word. And so it's easy to abuse those things when you have those kind of events all come together at the same time, where it's available and you also don't really want to face reality. And so for a long time, I took way too many of those things, and frankly, I'm lucky. There's a lot of people in this country that haven't been lucky, and lived through it. But I used marijuana to get off of it when they legalized it in Colorado. It's not a big part of cycling culture. Some sports, marijuana is more part of the culture, but cycling wasn't really like that. And I never used it as an athlete when I was racing. But I used it to get off of those drugs. And I thought to myself, look, this is something that actually matters to me. And I'm not a great charismatic salesman if I'm just trying to sell something for the sake of selling it, but this is something that I believe in, and it works. And we also at the same time started a CBD brand, because the hemp laws were changing gradually, and they're still getting better. But that was something we could sell actually across state lines rather than just in dispensaries in Colorado. And so we started that as well. And I've seen a lot of people really benefit from it. There's not as much real robust scientific research as there would be if it hadn't been illegal for so long, but there's enough anecdotal evidence out there that people are benefiting from it just as a quality of life thing. There's also people making crazy claims about curing cancer and all these other things that I think are just may or may not be true, but they certainly aren't substantiated in any way. But as something just for managing pain and anxiety, if that's your personality, this CBD on its own has a tremendous quality of life benefit, certainly for me and for a lot of other people. And so for me, it's an easy job to have, because it's something that has helped me, and it's something I see helping other people. But yeah, that's kind of the story of how it evolved and how I got into it.
Yeah, so you can see I've got my little handy Floyd's on the Go box right there.
Nice.
So I'm thinking about you all the time, my friend. Yeah, so you've got some dispensaries in Portland, Oregon too, is that right?
Yeah, so we have 4 dispensaries in Oregon, 3 in Portland, and 1 near on the I-5 near the Washington border,
Mm-hmm.
and then we have 1 in Colorado as well. That's probably half of our time, that side of the business, and then the other half is growing hemp. We grow it now in Pennsylvania. So yeah, the CBD side, as long as it's derived from hemp, it's not required to be sold through dispensaries. So there's a much bigger market available, right? We can send it to any state, and we can sell it in retail, just normal retail stores. And we grow it in Lancaster County. We have about 25 Amish guys that have been growing it for us, and we're about to harvest this year again. And yeah, the crop looks good, and that part I enjoy as well, just because it's gotten me back close to my family, and I feel like I've kind of come full circle there. I'm not back to being Mennonite, but I feel like I appreciate that place, and it's worked out really well for both the Amish farmers and for us.
I mean, that's called paying it forward, right? And giving back in a certain way. I mean, you're paying them to raise a crop that you're then turning around and trying to help others.
right?
Yeah, and it's good for them too. Not to go on a tangent there, but the farmers have it pretty rough these days. A lot of it there used to be dairy farming, and all the dairy now comes from South America, or it's imported, and growing corn doesn't make any money. And so they used to have a cash crop that was tobacco, but that really doesn't have any value anymore either. It's more commercial. So that they're happy to have something that they can actually make a living on.
Yeah. Well, look, man, as we've, gone through this, you've had like 9 lives of a cat, and I don't know, maybe you're on like life four right now.
Yeah. I'm not sure which one it is.
Yeah. Well, I have too. I would have never imagined being in some valley and climbing mountains and doing some of the things I'm doing as well. But that's just part of the thrill of life, and just understanding, I think, when we're all going through bad times, that there's a bigger picture. And if you got to keep fighting, and you got to keep pushing through. And once you get to the other side, you can step into the fear. I think a lot of amazing things can happen, just like what's going on with you and helping other people, as well as really empowering the Amish back in Pennsylvania with their different crops.
Yeah, it's good for me too. It's a two-way street, but yeah, I think you're right. If there's one thing that I guess if I try to reflect on it all that I learned is that life is long, right? You just got to keep going sometimes, and don't try to change the world to suit the way you want it to be at any given moment, just because, things aren't working. Just kind of let some things happen sometimes. I mean, as much as it's not my personality, sometimes that's the best thing to do. And yeah, ended up back here, and I don't plan on climbing Mount Everest though. I'll root for you, but I'm not doing that.
Well, we're going to plan on bringing some Floyds to go all the way up the mountain and all the way back down in a very safe way. Yeah. So are you on the bike anymore?
Yeah, a couple times a week. I enjoy it again now. For a lot of reasons, I didn't enjoy it after the whole 2006 experience. Part of that was I wasn't happy with myself, and I also was fairly recognizable if I was on a bicycle. So I would always constantly have to just talk about the same subject, and I just didn't. I stopped for a long time, but now I feel like I go around my bike and I feel like when I was a kid, where I can think and I can enjoy it, and it doesn't have anything to do with trying to win anything. I just go ride for the sake of fresh air and some exercise, and whatever spiritual experience, endurance sports come with.
Yeah, that's awesome. How many people live in Leadville, Colorado?
Oh, it's small. It's about 2,500 people, but they do a good job there. The town puts on all kinds of events, including the endurance events. But every weekend they've got a big event, and usually weekend population there is maybe 10,000. It's great. It's a nice atmosphere. It's a really cool little town.
I'd love to visit. I've never been there.
Yeah, come visit sometime.
Well, it was goofy because I signed up for the Leadville, and it's a lottery, and I paid probably $150, and I didn't get in, and they kept my money. I was like, "What's up with that?" Yeah.
So it's actually a lottery.
Yeah. So I don't know if you've got any pull on that. I'd love to do it and put my body through that.
I think I could probably find some people that can make sure they can make that happen. They'd probably love to have you up there.
Yeah, I know it'd be a lot of fun. Okay, well, listen. I first of all, a couple things, takeaways. Number one, you're a brave soul for stepping up and wanting to do this podcast. Number two, you're a good dude. Number three,
thanks, Mark.
There's a lot of positivity I see going forward in your life and the things that you're doing. I've been rubbing some of this lotion on some of these different parts of my body that hurt from back in the day, and it's helping out. And I appreciate that. And I'm going to give some of these things to my daughter. I'm going to see her in a couple of weeks down in Tucson, Arizona. And, fingers crossed on that, but nothing but the best for you going forward. And you've been a joy. Where can people find you and certainly find out more about this product?
Yeah, so they can check out our website at floydsofleadville.com. The Floyd's on the Go brand we created for convenience stores and places that are just sort of in single or a few doses of CBD. And then we have the Floyd's of Leadville line, which is just larger multiple dose versions of hemp-derived CBD products. And we have it online there, and a bunch of information they can check out if they're interested in it. But yeah, I'm glad it's helping you. And like I said, I wish the best for your daughter, and hope she finds some solution there so she can have a normal life. But yeah, come see me in Leadville. I'll absolutely put in a word for you there. I'm pretty sure I can get you on that list without having to play the lottery again.
Oh, sweet. Awesome. Have you, by the way, one last question. Have you ridden in that race?
I did it a couple times. I did in 2007 when I was still sort of in shape from racing for 10 years, and I finished second. It was probably a little over 7 hours. The times have gotten better now. The bikes have gotten a little lighter, but there's more focus on it, and the guys are racing pretty fast there. I started it a couple times recently, but I didn't finish the whole thing. I mean, honestly, it's if you're training to climb Mount Everest, it's probably a good event to do because you get some real altitude up there. But that's really the hard part. If you don't spend some time up there training at altitude, it's a difficult race. It's very difficult.
Well, and that's one of the reasons why I moved to Sun Valley. I live at, I'm not as high as you, but 6,000 feet, and so I run up to 10,000 every day. So at least get
that's
right
direction. 10's good. 10's plenty of altitude, man.
All right, buddy. Well, listen, he is Floyd Landis, superstar. And again, I really appreciate you being on the pod.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me. And stay in touch. Let me know when you're in Leadville. Let's hang out.
All right, buddy. Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Hey, thank you so much for dropping in and listening to another amazing episode of Finding Your Summit. Truly incredible people doing spectacular things in life, and I hope you were inspired just like I continue to be. Look, I am super grateful that you came in and subscribed to this pod, and would be more than appreciative if you gave the show a ratings and review on iTunes. Trust me, it matters. And then also go share it with your friends, of course. Okay, until next week, go do something great, and remember, it takes a little more to make a champion. Bye. Hey, and thank you so much for listening to the Find Your Summit podcast. We are so glad to have you along for this journey. And if you enjoy the show, please tell a friend, share it on iTunes, spread it to the planet. We're looking to broadcast this to every person that is out there because, as you know, everybody has their own summit that they're going after. Okay, if you're looking to follow my journey, you can find that through my social links on markpattisonnfl.com. That's Mark, M-A-R-K, Pattison, P-A-T-T-I-S-O-N, NFL.com. So, until the next podcast, just remember, clear eyes, full hearts, and remember, it takes a little more to make a champion, so make it happen. Thank you. Bye.